This is weird.
respect for folks that showed up on time, so. Great. Good evening, I'm Scott Chesney with Spokane County Planning. We've got planners here to answer questions as we go on. We had intended, and we will go through a series of slides that talk about growth alternatives, and that's going to, what we're doing this for is our comprehensive plan. The county has a comprehensive plan, has to be updated every 10 years. We're in that cycle now. We have to be done by December of 26. We have been working on this with the cities and towns in the county for a couple of years already. And today, the progress will talk about how we're going to grow a whole new group of people over the next 20 years. The plan goes from 2026 to 2046. The slide that's up here is kind of a duplicate of the first map, or the map on the left, which looks at, if you can see the lighter areas, they're kind of yellow and orange-ish. Those are what we call the urban growth areas. Those are created to expand the growth outside of the cities, but at urban densities or suburban densities that you see all around us here in Moran Prairie. And that's where we are right here in this group. Down there, below that, or in the green, are what we call the urban reserve. That's a zoning classification that those of us that were here 20 years ago created as the next likely place for us to grow if we grew out and filled up these areas. So as we look toward growth, we look at those green areas as the first study areas of where we should be looking to grow pieces. We're doing this through a process called an environmental impact statement or an environmental impact analysis. And there's three scenarios. One is do nothing. One is look at infill. One is look at infill plus some growth. The do nothing is to say, if we change none of our development regulations or zoning and do no changes to the boundary of that urban growth area, how do we accommodate 100,000 new people? The second one is changing those development regulations. Chiefly what that means is increasing density. Can we increase density in enough areas to absorb 100,000 people? And that's countywide, so the cities are at some share. The county share in these unincorporated areas is expected to be about 35,000 people. And then the third is more of our historic growth pattern. If we keep that pattern, keep the densities roughly where they are, provide some new kinds of zoning that help build better communities instead of just blank subdivisions, that may increase the urban growth area, the boundary itself. And so these are the three approaches we're looking toward. And we're doing it also with a face toward housing, not just population. This is new. In the last legislative session, the legislature changed the Growth Management Act, which is the law that governs planning in Washington State. In the previous cycles, there's a mandate that simply says you must provide for affordable housing in your plan. The legislature now made that far more detailed in saying you must not only do that, but you must do it in these income bands. And it's based on the area median income, that household income, half of which are above, half of which are below. And so all of those allocations, you can see in that 30 to 50%, 3,300 units, those are things we have to plan for now, specifically to not prohibit affordable housing, but how can that get built to help solve the housing shortage and housing crisis that's been in the county for several years. This is a very, very difficult thing to do. First off, it's never been done before. Secondly, the Growth Management Act treats counties and cities as the same. And in some cases that works, but in a case like this, it's very difficult. Cities are far better handlers of a wider range of incomes because they've been built that way from the very beginning. Also, a lot of social services are in the cities. Their transit services are better in the cities. When we're working out here on the edge, there's often not transit. Moran Prairie is fortunate to be one of the first to have Moran Station, where you've got not express with a good transit service downtown and to the north side. Not all places have that. And the county has developed as suburban densities, and suburban densities make affordable properties very hard to build just from the sheer cost of land alone. So this is a big challenge for us that we're trying to work through. Second major influence on where we grow is the critical areas ordinance, or our critical areas themselves. On that second map from the left is a representation of a lot of those, and we've got some here to show you as well. But in some cases, you could think of this as where not to build. Now, these are some of them obvious: wetlands, streams, stream buffers. Some are less obvious: wildlife corridors, steep slopes, things like that you can see here. That slide's pretty light, but that is the Spokane Valley Moran Prairie Aquifer, from which most of us on this part of the county get our drinking water. It is significant. It's one of the largest aquifers in the United States, but it is not infinite. We have to care for it carefully. And it's not so much draining it, but it's make sure it doesn't get harmed in some way by pollution or contamination. And we'll talk about, again, we'll add into that. But you can perhaps see it's so light, it ends roughly at the river, which means the entire West Plains area, Haraway Heights, Medical Lake, Cheney, all of that area draw from a very different aquifer. And that's not something that a lot of people think about when we're in the middle of the city. This is a map showing some of those other geohazard areas. Kind of focused again, you can see a little bit of a blow up here from Newman Lake on the north side of town in doing that. And one of the things on that northeast quadrant, sort of from the city of Spokane, is the soils in that area are like sand. They're called like sandy loam soils, which means they drain and what's called percolate very well. So when you've got a lot of development in that North Mead area, and it's all on septic systems, those septic systems can drain very quickly into the aquifer, and that's why this is so important to protect that. When you get to the South Hill where we are here, I'm sure you all know, we're sitting on the basalt pile, and that makes drainage also very difficult here. It's why stormwater management is so important. Right off 57th, the whole Hazels Creek area that goes down is designed as a flood control measure, even though we're 500 feet above the river. And then wetlands, the map on the right being the whole county, you can see how they're concentrated in our southwestern portion around Cheney. Not surprisingly, the Turnbull Wildlife Refuge is there for migratory birds. And so these are areas that are very challenging in which to develop. And then conservation areas, corridors, these generally follow the streams and rivers and move from that. And again, the whole point is to start laying aside lands that really shouldn't be grown or shouldn't be changed from agriculture or ranching as well. Another new element from the legislature was creating a climate and resiliency plan. It's never been part of the Growth Management Act before, and now it's a separate element that we have to study the impacts of climate on how it affects our air quality, how it affects our traffic patterns, and how it affects our growth patterns. And one way of thinking of that is, for get back to what we're talking about, if we can grow more housing closer to where people work and play, recreate, they travel less on the road to get there. Pretty obvious. If we can't build that housing here, we have the disadvantage of the economy of Kootenai County being right next door, where the prices are not that much different, but the regulatory system is very different in Idaho than it is in Washington. And so if that housing is built over here because it's easier and faster to get there, well, now there's more people on I-90 working more trips every day. You have to build more lanes on the freeway, and not particularly useful. So that's one example. The other that you see here, things like drought, extreme temperature, and a really reminder of the resiliency side of this is wildfire and wildfire smoke. In 2023, we had the gray and elk fires that were devastating in the Medical Lake area in the northern part of the county at Elk. Resiliency planning can't stop that, but it can allow developers, even homeowners, to see tools to use that might give you some cushion against future disaster. So bringing all of these things into planning is what we're doing. And so this is that alternative one, the infill strategy. You can see we're looking at how we accommodate, 25,000 new housing units over the planned area, from smaller site packages to bigger packages as well. Our historic development pattern in the county's low density zoning allows up to 8 units an acre of single family detached development. That was changed in 2020 from 6 units an acre up to 8 to help address the housing crisis identified then. 5 years later, we still have a big shortage of housing for workers and workforce incomes. But that development pattern at a legal 8 units an acre actually works out to about 4.5. And so in this case, we're saying, realistically, if we bump that to 6 units an acre, what does that give us for extra capacity on the same land? And a similar follows for the rest of these categories, including the commercial sites, which we're adding a more, I would say aggressive, but a higher allowance for residential living in and around commercial areas. And that infill will show up here in just a minute when we talk about what's going on around us. So what do these densities look like? Easy to talk about them: 6 units, 12 units, 16 units an acre. Well, what do they look like? The slide on the left is that 6 units an acre. You can see the top photo looks like a pretty typical streetscape, some smaller front yards, but street terraces, street trees, sidewalks, front facing garages. If you look at the photo on the bottom, see if this works here. Oh, look at that. There's the streetscape going through here in the first row of homes on both sides. But these have a second row of homes essentially tucked in the backyards of them. In sometimes the places created what we call accessory dwelling units, which were 800 square foot small apartments for a parent or sometimes a child or an adult child coming back. This is a system that allows that, and literally a second home, to have that access. So you've got that, but that's what it takes just to hit 6 units an acre. It's much a different pattern than we have here in suburban Spokane County. If we get to 9 units an acre, and if we stay there because I keep my fat finger on the right button, the single family detached gets a lot tighter, a lot closer together. The side yards are virtually gone. They're down to fire code distances between buildings. And then the rest of that are duplexes, triplexes, and essentially a carriage house style living. Still can have some very nice amenities, a much higher density, and you also lose the actual kind of street pattern that you've got in the first one. If we keep moving up in that 15 units an acre, we still have the ability of single family around the edge, but then much heavier use of duplexes, townhouses, the flats, stacked flats, carriage houses, a variety of architecture, which gives us some kind of unique character. And so you can get to that 15 units an acre and still have, some actual sort of private open space around you and do that. Then when you get to 18, you're pretty much at that 3-story walk-up apartment style, more traditional multifamily, almost no green space except in a very formal area. It might have a clubhouse or a pool. And so that's what these densities look like when we're talking about them. And the reason we're doing this is, as we talk to groups and folks like you, we're asking you for your comments and your questions, because we're taking that back to the County Planning Commission to say, which of these do you like? How do you want to start planning for things? And then that will also go to the Board of County Commissioners that will help provide direction on how much density are you comfortable with versus more traditional suburban growth. So in that alternative one.
Oh, question, because I say whether we could start asking questions or not.
We've got a cast of thousands. We
Okay.
have to be very formal here.
Okay.
Jump in,
Well,
jump in whenever you want.
My concern right now is that I haven't seen where you're looking at, especially in this area. We live off of Brea Freya and 37th area.
Okay.
And, you know, at this point, if we're trying to get out of our development, take a left to go up Freya, we can't do it. And,
Phrase getting busier every day.
and we're putting a new development in, you know, that corner of the Palouse Highway, Freya and 55th. And at this, right now, with, prior to that development going in, you have people that are parking on the road on 55th. And you have people that are on the Palouse Highway that are in the kind of the sun rental area that are parking on the road.
Right.
People coming out of any of those developments up there, they're either gonna go down Regal, which dead ends them on 29th, or they're gonna come down Freya, which dead ends them on 37th. So there's no place for these people to come, and I understand what you're talking about as far as putting in that bus station. But, you know, from a planning point, what type of flow, you know, what's the data that supports even able to handle what we have right now? What, you know, how much traffic is running down through there as we speak?
Yeah.
Do we have data on that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Extensive. Now
Oh.
it's mostly, it's generally, city impacts rather than county, but we work together in the area from 50.
So is there, because from what I understand, for the last 30 years, they've been planning on doing something to ease the traffic flow and, you know, what is there a plan there?
There was.
Okay,
The city
so-
had a plan. The county did not at the time, because the county was operating on these edges and they weren't developing as fast as they were 20 years ago.
Right.
It's new out here, but I don't know if I can quite quickly show
Yeah,
it to
how
you
do you-
here.
Yeah, how do you
But the
plan on
city, and
helping the flow of traffic?
I don't want to blame the city, but this is a city problem.
Well,
Yeah.
it's everybody's problem,
Yeah.
you know, and what's the solution on that?
Part of it is something that you would think is obvious. As the South Hill was growing, Regal should have been planned in a different way. Because it's the same street it was
Oh, yeah.
20 years ago,
Yeah.
with hundreds of thousands of more trips on it. And for a big stretch of that, really from the school, from 37th South, there was room to expand the highway and build a 4-lane, 5-lane section if need be. We've kind of lost that opportunity for most of it.
Right.
But what the city had planned at the time, and here's Regal, there's 37th.
Right.
And the high school is here.
Right.
What was planned was called the Freya bypass, which was to come down Ray, cut through the school, come over to Freya and build Freya down. If you drive Freya, you can see, as you look at Ferris, there's that curved piece of land with the two fences in there.
Mhm.
That's the right of way that was acquired for the bypass. And the city still owns on the corner of Ray and 37th. They own the first 8 properties east of Ray, because that would have been acquired to make that go, and then
Okay.
it would go into Freya, and Freya would be improved out to Palouse Highway. In 2014, the city council voted to take that option out of the city's comprehensive plan. You took it off the table. Don't know why. And the reason that's important is arterials have to be in the comprehensive plan to be funded. If you don't have your arterial street system in there, you can't factor in for traffic impacts in other areas, and you can't make it eligible for state and federal funding. So for whatever reason, the city gave up on that approach. So we're kind of stuck with that. Now, it's a longer term. I think I'd figured this out after all these years. It's slightly less elegant solution, but the Glenrose to Carnahan system is probably gonna pick up some of that traffic going forward on the east side. Cause it goes essentially right down to I-90.
Oh, yeah, I'm familiar with the roads around there, but
And
that's the people that are coming out of these developments are running down Freya. They're not going over to Carnahan. unless they changed the Carnahan area.
There is some increase of traffic on Crestline to get down to 37th. It comes over to Perry. It sometimes moves down. And then also the Bernard and around the country club through High Drive. But yeah, there are limited ways to move
Right,
out
and
of
that's,
this area.
yeah, and that's just talking yeah, and, you know, so when these developments are coming in. And I tried to look to see what was permitted as far as the one that I was just talking about, and. You know, that there's some type of an impact, there's gotta be. That says here, got. That, no, you can't put it there because we don't, you know, we'll end up. This area, like they do with the 195 trying to get onto the 90. That's what I see right now, and then the other is that we are down at. The 37th area, and just 2 weeks ago, when we had the big rain. Our storm drains are not plugged. They can't handle the water, and as we continue to build. That, you know, that water has to go someplace.
Well, that is the purpose of the Hazel's Creek system that goes behind.
Oh, yeah, and I understand,
Graham
I understand
all
that,
of
but it has to get there first. And right now, when you're adding more and more, and it's not getting there. That 2 weeks ago, it was the weekend, I was driving up Freya. The bottom coming out of our development, again, is just closer to 37th, it was flooded. Driving up the hill on Freya, you know, you could see where, you know, there's flooding where, you have to actually go into the northbound lanes to avoid the southbound flooding or stop, so you can allow. It's
not,
yeah,
there is
so I,
easy solution.
no, yeah.
What we do, and part of the reason we showed you those slides up front
Right.
is to be better aware of where those areas are. And critical areas are not just natural areas, they could be built areas that have problems.
Well,
So
where I am, we're in the Burkdale development. And we have 90 some homes. We just had, our annual fall meeting. And I'm not here as a representative. But there's a lot of people that are very, very concerned about the building that is going on, and especially the traffic. That intersection of 37th and Freya is a nightmare, especially when the kids are getting out of school or going to school.
and I don't want to get too far away.
Yeah, no,
But two quick things.
Okay.
I said the city gave up on that bypass. Yeah, that was 10 years ago. What's planned are 2 traffic improvements, and Ray and 37th is planned for a full multi-directional traffic signal. To control traffic at that intersection. And Abrea is planned on a roundabout. So that the traffic can flow.
Remember the one that they put on 57?
Yes,
That size?
pretty much that size.
Okay,
Yeah.
cause that I think helped. Yeah.
And then in addition to that, there's another roundabout that'll be under construction in 26 at Freya and Palouse Highway. And so there
yeah,
are
with
some
the flashing
improvements
lights, yeah.
that can help in some way.
So we're looking maybe in 2 years, we might.
Well, the one
Yeah.
at Freya and Palouse is designed and funded and will be under construction next year. The others, I don't know, they're
Yeah.
in the books, but within kind of the 6-year
Yeah.
time frame. And it is important because in this alternative 1 strategy for infill, we have to take into account what we call concurrency, but it's what are the traffic impacts if this development goes in? And if they are more than the road can handle, how does that development have to mitigate those concerns so that it improves those traffic facilities so that the traffic can flow better? So it's a factor in essential approval of these projects can't happen without transportation improvements being tied to them.
Understanding that, and I'm just gonna make a comment on that, in that I've seen where I'll put another exit lead going out of my development, or I'll do something to that respect, but then you still end up with the bottleneck. You've moved the bottleneck.
Sometimes that's
Yeah.
true, but in other cases, that mitigation may not be adjacent to the project itself. It might be improving an intersection half a mile away, so that as that comes out of a different set of grids, it doesn't just get clogged over here.
Thank you.
So we looked at three target areas in this Moran Prairie, Glenrose area. First, you can see right there at Blues Highway at 57th, then at 57th and Regal, and over at Perry. And so this first one, you know where these are, of course.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's Blues, that's 57th. The DQs now right in there. You need a blizzard anytime. And this land to the south is all in that urban reserve that you can see on that map. But this is a case of this already has some levels of higher density zoning, and what would happen if we added to that, moved it to higher densities all the way around. And granted, these are just zoning maps, but you can look at what's now kind of medium density or high density residential and think of it as a commercial use that could add some amenities as long as you've got apartments and things. These are both the churches. The other roundabout is going to go right there. If they were to be in a more mixed use pattern, how much development could you put into that project? We know it's not marked down here, but the partial land sale of that ranch to the YMCA a couple of years ago is going to generate traffic and interest out here. And so you can kind of see it more on the ground in this case. And this is, of course, looking west. North is that way. And the YMCA will be back over here, the transit station. But you can see that mini storage takes up some land, but it's also something that when what the realtors call a higher and better use comes along, it's very easy to move out of there for multifamily or some other kinds of apartments. Second area is at Regal. Same idea, recognizing that a lot of this has been built out in a very suburban fashion. Of course, we're sitting right over here. Safeway is in here, post office is up here. There are some parcels, and granted, some of these are in part of the drainage system that we have to be really careful about. But it allows for some consideration of what's going on in there. Then the second alternative, shifting gears, this is the one that allows for more standard suburban densities, plus some quality of density improvements in those areas. But then the idea of potentially adjusting the urban growth boundary. And we make kind of a note that while we can't quantify pressure from Kootenai County, the pressure is there in people's minds. And sometimes perception becomes reality, and that's makes things happen. So a couple of things that are different here, what we call blended zoning. So if we create a neighborhood zone instead of a low density residential, medium density residential, high density residential triad, the ability would be you could build any of that on the same site at the same time, but it would come with design and development standards. So it wouldn't just be a 3-story walk-up apartment with a parking lot in front of it and 3 single-family homes in front of it. It would be something designed to look like it all blended together, and that includes the amenities, street trees, connectivity, street grid connections. You mentioned your community. Well, when you've got one way in and one way out, it's always going to have a bottleneck. If you build to a traditional old-fashioned grid, people have choices on how they can move in and out of those neighborhoods. A lot of our subdivisions over the last 10 years have been one way in, out, or 2 ways in and out. Have been pretty much self-contained up against each other.
Yeah, we're looking at that right now. Coming out on 37th and on Freya.
So back to where we started, the critical issues, we've got to start with those amenities and public spaces. This is something that cities used to do by default. Houses that were built in the early teens or the 1919s, those folks aged out. Younger folks bought them, brought their family in, and you have this succession of homes being in the same neighborhood, where you have younger families, middle families, older families, seniors. The current subdivisions really aren't built for that. They're all built with the same, generally speaking, 2, 3, 4 bedroom home. They're generally built at the same time, so they're all the same age, they're the same price. And so they attract a very uniform buyer, and your entire neighborhood doesn't look anything like, you know, a traditional city neighborhood. But if you plan for that in advance, you can have a situation where somebody can come in with a young family. They can grow, they can maybe move within a block or two, but they could stay in a neighborhood for their entire life and not have to feel like they're moving all over the place, so. Yeah,
Alt one is just infill and alt two is infill plus expanding into those areas that you were talking about. That was the alt two, alt one.
essentially, yes, because the neighborhood zone implies a level of infill that still is more dense than the traditional low density residential. So yes, that's essentially accurate. These are kind of the some set of development standards that we would use to make these changes, density limits, coverages, height limits, minimum lot sizes, and to say, you know, here are a different set of criteria that we might use to guide development. And, you know, if you go way back to the 50,000 foot level, the comprehensive plan itself is a series of goals and policies that shape design of places. The zoning, subdivision, critical area regulations are the laws that shape how they must be built. And so this is how we move into that regulatory side of the structure. And the second version of that, you know, for example, now goes to perhaps no minimum lot sizes, no coverage or parking requirements that used to exist in the other areas. And there are ups and downs on all of these. If you eliminate lot sizes, for example, you give builders a chance to put up a smaller structure that someone maybe in that 80 to 100% AMI might be able to afford to purchase instead of have to live in a multifamily place that they have to rent. If you have minimum lot sizes that are 4,000 square feet, the land alone makes it so expensive that you can never have an affordable property. So those are some ideas being considered. And then on the commercial side, again, these mixed use standards that allow for commercial, but also some residential. And so this changes that development grid that you saw before to push this back down to that lower density level, leaving these a little bit higher and having some growth ability in here. And this is kind of a wild card factor. These are historic, well-accepted numbers on persons per household that have been used for a long time just to calculate density and things like that. They're changing. They're smaller. Households are getting smaller. Even in our corner of the world, that's probably 2.1 on average now, and the 1.5 might be 1.2. So the household sizes are getting smaller, which means the units can be smaller and people can still be comfortable. But it also means you're going to have more of them to house the same population. So what would that look like? This is an example, illustration to be sure, of a blended neighborhood. You've got some kind of townhouse what we call live work, which means there could be small shops in the front of these, accountants, architects, barbers, who could live above their shop and therefore not have a rent in a downtown of some kind. It's got alley loaded projects in the back from single family that face the street. The ability of some multifamily that fits in, looks at a green space, connectivity on the grid, both for pedestrians and automobiles, and then trail connections, including connecting to regional trail systems. All of those amenities were highly thought of by groups, people like you that we talked to in March and May of this year as we went around the county. It's like, what are the things you want to see? And we did a similar thing, putting up photos. Score this photo, score this photo, score this photo with these different amenities. So this is kind of reacting to what we've seen here in Spokane County. Now, the next slide is, what do you, if you take this same neighborhood and start to look at that resiliency issue, climate resiliency, well, now you can look at things like solar energy, you can look at drainage and flood aversion. You can look at green space being a fire separation benefit. So again, you can use those attributes and layer on different things so that you design this up front, so you don't have retrofits, you don't have expensive things happening after you go forward. So now the details of the urban growth area itself. It's really, in one case, it's really simple. Future growth, if the exceeds the current combined capacity of the unincorporated lands, you have reason to expand your urban growth area. Simply put, if you've run out of land to develop, you need more. The second one is a little more nuanced, is that if that increased capacity is not able to be used or desired by the local community, you can make a case for, again, that same expansion. And then there's some guidelines that look at that in a way that's more along this category, which is no net increase. You don't use resource lands where we first started, the critical areas, adequate capital facilities. This is right back to what you talked about in terms of transportation and water and sewer. And again, not larger than what we need, and then you can't just make these all over the place. They have to be contiguous. What we've done for Spokane County is looked at a scoring system using both the statutory criteria, which are in what's called the WAC, or the Washington Administrative Code. And those are the rules that implement the statutes in the RCW. We created a series of local criteria. It has to already touch the boundary. It has to be in an area that has existing sewer capacity. We started with 10 acres or more for parcels. Here's the at least nearness to highways. This is that transportation piece, the urban reserve part, a study area like we showed you on the previous slides. And then the last one is confirmed development interest. As you might imagine, a lot of landowners and agents are interested in growing, and they want to be in a future urban growth area. The GMA does not allow a city or a county to accept an application to come into that area. But what we do is we simply say, send us a letter of interest so we know that you would like to do this. If you meet all of these criteria and the selection is down to a parcel that someone is ready to develop and someone is not ready to develop, it's easy to go and say, well, okay, this one's ready to go. Let's go in this direction. So what's that going to look like for this area? And this, I know these are hard to see up here. We have a similar map on that table. And I'd encourage you when I get done, which will be very soon, to go look at that. What you're going to see are the darker covers are generally meeting more of those criteria that you saw on the previous page. This is the first cut at the maps. We did these a couple of weeks ago. We're starting to look at things like, if that parcel is well, here's a better example. If these have meet like 2 criteria, but the same owner might own all 4 of those and make it a more desirable parcel, that's going to change its scoring a little bit in the next round. So what this is generally showing, and again, here's that's 57th, there's Palouse coming through the existing area here. So remember, this is all outside of that urban growth area, the whole Glenrose, Prairie, Dishman, Micah Hills on this side. So there's this growth pressure on the east side of the city of Spokane, off of 37th, off of 29th, wrapping around to here, back to the area right by the Dairy Queen and moving around. Now this, we'll have a second slide in it. This one goes across 195 too, but what you can see, like we said, is those parcels that are the darkest meet the most of the criteria at this time. And so those will be the likely target parcels we'll look at if we need to expand and if we can legally expand the urban growth area. So this one is a little more direct on the West Plains. We put it up particularly because, as you mentioned, the 195 corridor has its own challenges to be certain. But we're also looking at the fact that this area with the Air Force, with the airport, the lands that the airport board owns through here, and the job creation out here is going to be, it's going to be a booming area for non-residential development for another 20 years. And right now, there's less housing out here than in most areas. So again, back to that kind of first thing, an awful lot of people are driving from less expensive areas on the east side of our county, even Post Falls, to work as civilians at Fairchild, to work at Amazon, and to do these things. If we can provide some better housing in these areas, everybody's living closer to where they work, we take some traffic off the highway. So there's that, and again, I'll just go backwards. This is kind of the version of what's most impactful around you here in our area. We have done these for the entire urban reserve area. As I said, we're going through a refinement process now. We're listening to people again. We're taking notes and comments, and we're anxious to hear from you. So our schedule is we're holding this series to try to get some public comments. We will be having a session with our planning commission on October 30th to review these findings and talk to them in depth about their role as public policy representatives on where do you want to grow? Where do you see the strengths of this? Where do you see the weaknesses? We will turn right around and have a similar discussion with our board on November 3rd. And the board at that time is going to be asked to kind of narrow the range from that all infill to all lighter growth and push in toward the middle to say, let's do some of this and some of this. And then we will study that and issue a draft environmental impact statement probably in the middle of December. And that will have kind of these recommendations in it for growth. That goes out for a 45-day public comment period. Then we take, like we do here, we'll take all of those comments back into consideration, turn the crank on the machine again, go back to the planning commission, go back to the board, narrow it down again, and then issue a final environmental impact statement. And that will be the environmental assessment, after which we'll start adding on the rest of the comprehensive plan elements as we go through. So that's what we had. Thanks for your patience. There's a lot of information and happy to take more questions. Staff's here to talk. Like I said, if you're so inclined, we've got maps and pens and dots. You can write on them and say, I like this, I hate this. You should grow here, you shouldn't grow there. We're welcoming all of that comment.
Well, I wonder,
Start out.
what is the reasoning behind, putting 4 condos on a lot that was built with just one house? And I'm talking about the 4 on 37 by Hamlin Elementary.
Yep.
There's absolutely no parking for these people,
Right.
except for in front of other people's houses.
Right.
You've just,
Street.
the fellow that lives on the corner is now his house for sale because his backyard is a wall.
Well, he sold the
knew.
yard.
Yeah, he
so-
knew,
Right,
he knew,
right.
he knew. I know he knew, but it's,
He's crying all the way to
Yeah.
bank.
but it's to put something so big in such a small area.
I understand completely, and that is the challenge with an infill strategy. Now, again, that's city, not the county.
Mhm.
The city of Spokane has been very aggressive at its infill.
Mhm.
It has gone to that extreme and more by eliminating parking requirements, by allowing 0 lot line developments. And it's taking a very aggressive role at trying to capture its growth in these smaller developments.
Mhm.
There's another one, you may not have seen it, but right in the same area, off of Gray and 29th, on the corner.
Oh, yeah,
The southeast corner.
yeah.
That just went in,
Mhm.
and that's an 8-unit complex that
Yeah.
went in, 2 fourplexes or 2
Mhm.
fours,
Yeah.
townhomes side by side. So the city is pushing this as a very aggressive strategy. In some areas, say around 29th and Rio, Lincoln Heights Shopping Center. That makes some sense because you're building that same village. You're putting higher density homes where you can walk to a grocery store or 3 grocery stores. You can walk to restaurants, you can do things where that density makes some sense, but if you do it. You know, kind of willy-nilly just in every neighborhood, you're gonna end up with those properties like
Mhm.
37th and Hamlet.
But you also have, where you had one person flushing the toilet, now you have four.
Aha,
So now we're talking about, he's taking one shower and now they're taking four.
yeah,
And so nothing's been done,
yeah,
nothing's been done to change that. I mean, I know we've got the new water tank and that's. How is it gonna,
back in the '70s, you'd have solved that problem by saying, well, shower with a friend. You know,
Yeah,
that-
right,
back
right.
in the 70s. Sorry. What you brought though is a very important point, and that's back to that capital facilities idea. It's not just can the road network handle the traffic, can the infrastructure handle it? And in the city of Spokane's case, they're. I don't want to be unfair to them, but they're making a decision to increase these densities with, at the moment, the assumption that the existing infrastructure can handle that. That assumption is only gonna go so far. And the closer you get to the lower South Hill, the harder that's gonna be to do, and the lower South Hill is gonna be where some of this higher density is gonna be desirable, because again, you can walk to downtown, you could work at the medical centers. And yet. The sewer system in the lower South Hill. Is very interesting. I mean, obviously, you recognize it was built in the 1800s to start with. So it doesn't have a lot of modern materials in the residential parts of it. A lot of the street laterals have been replaced over the years. They weren't resized, they were replaced, so you've got that same size issue. Can that 4-inch pipe handle 20 more units on the same street? But the actual sewers, because it was expensive to go through that basalt, you didn't just drill a hole and run out to the street and run down the street. The builders meandered those through the easiest path they could get. And so there are dozens of properties on the South Hill that have other people's sewers running under your house, because that's the easiest place to put those. I get it, but they're impossible to upgrade. There's no possible way you can do that affordably. So that whole idea of, do you have adequate infrastructure for an infill assessment is critical, and it's very much on our minds. Michael, the guy in the middle back there, is the guy tasked with creating our capital facilities analysis. And he's getting nervous because we're trying to figure out if we can make any of this happen.
Well, Mike, you know, because that's kind of springboards into my question is that ideally, you know, for growth. You know, what's the road plan? You know, if we're looking at, we want to.
Yep.
You know, so is there a plan that is. You know. 20 years out, when that area does get developed, that will, you know, we'll have a road that will. The main arterials that will handle that.
Yes, yes, well, it sounds like there's a quick answer. We are planning a transportation system for growth. It's one of the things we're doing. It's different than, can the local transportation facility handle the multifamily complex that's going in next door? It's, where do we need the next North Spokane corridor?
Right.
Where do we need the big infrastructure to move people east and west here across 195?
We lived in the suburbs of Buffalo and we lived in the suburbs of Detroit. And we didn't seem to, I mean, it's not that they didn't have their issues, which they did, but at the same time, I mean, you had avenues and you had the, you know, the big arterials that.
That's what Detroit's famous for, 8 Mile Road and all the.
Well, I mean,
big arterials.
I worked in the city, but we lived further north.
Yeah.
everybody drives there. Everybody drives.
But Buffalo was the same, the suburbs of Buffalo and Amherst, we lived in Amherst, which is, that city at one time grew by like 100,000 within, you know, within it. Not that long time frame, but they had, it seemed like main, avenues that. You know,
Yeah, your
blocked off.
arterials are not, they're just streets. Most of them
Yeah.
are just streets.
They're not,
Well,
and then you can't expand.
Partly geography, and it's also the interstate
Huge
system
part.
was being built and the Rust Belt was growing, so we don't have
Yeah.
a belt here.
Yeah,
Complete contrast.
But it's not
Metro-
to need a belt.
Metro Phoenix. which is built with 6-lane arterials around
Mhm.
intersections, huge infrastructure around it. You can like it or hate it, but it moves 5 million people a day.
Right.
So back to this, there is no easy way to get from up here across this highway. It just, you've got bluffs, you've got hard terrain, you've got a creek, you've got railroads, you've got all sorts of stuff.
I don't think they did
So
any
that-
favors when they did the bridge, redid the bridge, at the bottom of Hatch.
That's a joke.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
They-
well, this map doesn't go far enough. There's actually a fairly straightforward solution to 195. And it doesn't involve the, $1 billion plus $2 billion cost to rebuild the I-90 bridge. DOT still doesn't like our idea, but that's because it's already a $30 million project. If you're going north on 195, before you get to the on-ramp to the freeway, come back 500 yards, something, start what's called a slip ramp. Build it off here, go underneath the railroad bridge, go underneath over the river, connect up to Sunset Highway at the top of the bridge. Now the downtown traffic can get downtown without touching the freeway or having to go to the south side of downtown into the grid and then filter its way back. You could do that for $30 million. And that'll be on our plan.
wow.
And that's
Great.
some of those things, we get laughed at. It's like, hey, are you nuts? We can't do that.
No, we
Of
didn't
course you can.
buy,
It's an
we didn't
engineering
buy
question.
up in that area just because of having to
Of
deal with
I-95.
195.
Here's this, again, it'd be hard to see. There's a couple of potential routes east-west in the West Plains
Mhm.
that have not been fully occluded or property acquired on the sides of it. Again, getting from 195 is expensive because of the river and the elevation change. But there are a couple of roads that can come through. One comes right off at Hatch and goes a good deal of the way across the area. And then another further north where you can essentially connect to Arrow Road off the intersection, the Medical Lake intersection, come down, and then there's also a straight shot all the way across. Now it's mostly property now, but it's all property lines. So you'd have to acquire a little bit of property from a bunch of people, but you wouldn't go through a big chunk of property. So yes, we're looking at transportation in a big way.
What one are you talking about? What,
Just now?
still, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I don't have the best map here, because I wasn't thinking about this. But this is the interchange that's out there now that Spokane Transit has their park and ride right there.
Underground Lake.
Yep, so if you come down Arrow Road, it's built to turn down to that line, just where the Avista corridor comes through. And there's almost a straight line of just property edges that go across there. And so if you want to pick, say, a path of least resistance, it's a lot of there, but it's very low density. It's on an edge of a property, so somebody loses 30, or the DOT or somebody has to buy 30 feet of property instead of buying their whole lot. And so it's like, let's put a line on the map. It may not be feasible in the short run, but like the North Spokane corridor, if you don't put some of those ideas on a map, you eventually lose the ability of ever having it happen because the land changes in between. So that's the kind of thing we want to look at, particularly in this southern West Plains, is how can we do better at getting it east to west across it? Because Thorpe Road is up on the north side, and otherwise you're way down to get across there. It's impossible. And that's the kind of secondary impact of the city putting their moratorium on development in Eagle Heights or Eagle Ridge was fire safety. There's so few routes in and out. If we could find another way of punching a couple ways east and west, then back to that resilience, the elk fire, if something happens there, there's more of a grid where you can actually move some people out of there.
Yeah, you're essentially talking about turning Howard into
That's the one. So it's not the only one, but it's one that pops out to us when you look at the map. So,
You still gotta go down, Bluff, onto 195. Right,
and, you know, it's easy for me to stand here and say, yeah, we're just gonna draw a line on a map. Well, okay, this part of it could be $10 million, and that last mile could be another 20 million to get through that whole system. But again, if you ignore it now, it'll be $100 million problem the next time. So, and the thing is, in a comprehensive plan process, you're doing it with public input, you're doing it with environmental assessment. You're covering all of the stones or uncovering those stones that you need to get into a federal or state funding path to get these things done. If you leave it out of plans like this, then somebody looks at it, well, you don't have it in your plan, it's not a part of your public policy, then no, we're not even gonna talk to you about it. So it's important that some of these things that don't look realistic right now still get into this thinking for, you know, when my predecessor's up here talking to you in another 10 years about what we're gonna do about it, we can say, yeah, look what we put on the map for you the first time. So,
But you're county, right?
yes,
County, yeah, right, so. And we have a state representative here right now? No.
in the room, no,
City,
The city?
no, not anybody from city staff. We coordinate with all the cities pretty
I'm
well.
thinking, because the 195 that's state, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, you know, so the, you know,
Yeah.
so you're.
We work with the local
with them,
DOT
your
office
guys,
very
yeah,
extensively.
you're our-
They sit in on
Help
our
us.
monthly planning meetings. And more coincidentally than anything else, tomorrow afternoon, a group of West Plains planners are getting together in our planning studio at the county to talk about transportation on the West Plains. We're gonna have Medical Lake, Cheney, Airway Heights, us and the city all in a room to say, let's talk about this thing for 2 hours.
Having lived in Michigan, Michigan has what we had always referred to as the Michigan turn, which basically you can't make a left-hand turn.
Well, that's what DOT
And-
put on.
Oh, yeah,
And
that's, I
95,
mean,
right.
that's, and I think that they're
That
telling us
was-
to do that
that
at the
was
bottom of the hatch
great.
too, isn't it? I would, yeah, because that, I mean, that just makes it
works.
flow.
The Arizona DOT was trying that in the mid-2000s, kind of same reason, to get rid of some of these safety issues on these bigger
Right.
arterials. The local landowners who would benefit from them also hated it. Because the right of way went from 120-foot right of way to a 300-foot right of way
Right.
to make this thing happen, and it was a huge ask of taking that land off there. And they weren't prepared, 'cause to them, that's a whole row of homes that could have sold. And that's here or there, but
We appreciate you guys.
other thoughts?
you mentioned, in Idaho, they call them ADU, an additional dwelling unit.
Accessory dwelling unit, right?
Here we call them what, accessory?
Yeah, that's a dwelling unit.
Oh, okay,
It's the same thing.
okay.
Well, you're welcome to look at the maps. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your attention. If you've got more thoughts and comments. Our website has a place where you can click and submit any comments you want. That comes through Rona to all of us. And, yeah, oh, yeah,
No raised hands.
okay.
What was that?
So there are no raised hands online.
We're live on Zoom as well. And these are recorded, if you or anybody, if neighbors wanna see it, it's usually posted next day.
Hope we're planning by the end of the day.
I think if you go to YouTube and search for Spokane County, our channel pops up.
Where would I find the traffic flow studies?
The city, go to the city street side. And they should have traffic counts you may have to drill down a little bit, they should have traffic counts from every year. They do them one or
But
2
they
years.
do it by, like, I'm interested in Freya.
Yeah.
So,
I haven't seen the cords out there in a couple of years, but normally anytime you see the rubber cords going across the street, they're doing traffic.
right, and then that's good, because I haven't seen one of those on Freya for a while, or that I've noticed.
And it's, we were talking about Regal and the Freya impact. Same thing. You've already got a lot of traffic, a lot of vehicles moving up there. So let's put in a Home Depot on 44th. And I've, we've already heard the horror stories about, the trucks coming out of Home Depot and trying to avoid Regal, so they go
Oh,
down
yeah.
to 44th. And then how long does it take them to turn left onto Freya? Cause the city did pull the hill back, so you've got better visibility. But
Yeah,
it's
it's not-
terrible.
Well, they've had to move the kids that were in Burkdale, and they got Greystone that's further south. And so the kids there, they come down to.
We walk through our neighborhood.
They
down
walk
the
through our
bottom.
neighborhood and come to, Burkdale, catch the bus, because that's a curve right there.
They-
They
not safe.
can't, it's not safe for them.
And it wasn't safe when they opened that road.
The reason that happened
Uh-huh,
was the multifamily that occurred, west of 44th, west of the single family homes that are there. There's a seniors complex, there's two other multifamily complexes in there,
Oh, yeah.
and the multifamily couldn't get approved unless it was on an arterial, and 44th at the time was not an arterial. The city said you're an arterial, but to do that, they had to connect it to Freya, where it wasn't connected before. And the planning side, the traffic folks were all like, this is insane, there's no visibility out there. And if you remember, the bluffs, that basalt bluff was up as high as the
Oh, yeah.
river is now,
Oh, yeah.
that carried all the way across, that had to be dynamited out just to put the road in. And the curvilinear was done just as a traffic control measure to slow down arterial traffic. But that was a whole series of compromises.
we just thought somebody important lived there. Wanted it open.
No, it was the multifamily project.
Oh, yeah. And
Because they couldn't be supported with adequate traffic control unless they had access to an
Yeah.
arterial, and 44th wasn't an arterial, so it had to be reborn as an arterial.
Do you know if that new development is going to have some,
Freya,
yeah.
yeah, that's
Freya and-
between Palouse and 55th.
Yeah. It-
I haven't heard anything yet, but there's the one that's already under construction on Freya on about 50th. And then
Yeah.
there's.
Oh,
this
yeah,
other batch.
right.
There's the other one,
On the east
that
bank.
Diamond Rock is doing further north,
Yeah.
and that's gonna be a bigger project, so
Well, that's the,
it's going to have
It's
impacts.
huge.
I don't,
mean,
I haven't seen any documents, but I don't see most of that anymore anyway.
well, that's when you get to the basalt, which it is up there, that, the water flow as it drains.
Yeah,
It's
come down.
changing all the time. And it's coming downhill.
As young
We're
people,
not happy,
You can tell the city we said so.
we're not happy.
We can stand out there and show them.
Yeah.
You don't need to study.
that basalt is the reason that on the FEMA floodplain maps, the upper South Hill in this area from 35th, 37th back to the Hazel's Creek
Right.
area it is a marked 500-year floodplain.
Right,
And you look at that and go, how is it, we're hundreds of feet above the river? It's because none of it drains. So if you get heavy rains, this entire area can flood.
yeah, we have people in our neighborhood that have sump pumps in their basement because of,
And they
Yeah.
had to be,
yeah,
and they had to, I'll think
yeah,
about it.
that's.
With
part of the-
our road is.
Part of the, where they're not happy.
Yeah.
Because that water is coming into their basements.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, after, if you're having the 4 meetings this week. That are open to the public.
Yes.
Are the next meetings open to the public?
Yes, that'll be the planning commission on the 30th. Those are always open to the public.
Where,
They're downtown in the commissioner's hearing room in the Public Works Building, 9 AM on Thursday, the 30th. Then the following meeting that we'll be doing will be briefing the Board of County Commissioners, also at 9 AM on Monday, the 3rd. And those are open, they're also on Zoom, so you don't have to drive downtown. At the Planning Commission, there will be a chance to make comments from Zoom. So if you want to participate and don't want to come downtown, you're able to come up on screen and we can hear you. After that, we don't have any meetings specifically planned beyond, we do a once a month, what we call a virtual brown bag or a virtual open house, where the first Wednesday of every month at noon, we take on one of these GMA elements. We've done climate, we're gonna do capital facilities in November. So that first Wednesday, we're also up on camera. That's not a public meeting in the sense that public can attend in person, but it's all virtual. We'll do those mostly through June with different topics every time. Those are posted on the website, the topics. We notice them in the newspaper, if anybody reads the newspaper anymore. So those are our regular ones, and then our planning commission meetings twice a month are always open to the public. So there's a lot of way to reach us, and of course, you know, you can reach us through email and comments directly. Thanks, you're welcome, like I said, to take a look at the maps, ask questions of our staff. So thanks for coming up.